We've dimmed the lights, started the coffee pots, and pushed the captain's chair out of the way. Because this, my friends, is Spaced Out Sunday. I am Everett Thiemer, and we are happy to welcome Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio to tonight's show. If you would like to listen to our archives, they're always free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our brand new website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, wandering through the SOR vault where you can find some really cool swag, hanging out with the space travelers, and so much more. Tonight's show is brought to you by CHIVE Charities. Please head on over to Spaced Out Radio's official charity, chivecharities.org, as we try to help make this world 10% better. In October of 1928, Elfrieda Knaak was found burned in the furnace room of the Lake Bluff, Illinois police station, bringing national attention to the town declared most patriotic town in America during World War I. The investigation took twists and turns straight out of Hollywood, and statements Elfrieda Knaak made herself as she lay dying in the hospital added to the mystery. Almost forgotten about, Kraig Moreland learned as a youth of the story and has spent countless hours digging through archives and research materials to bring the story back to life in his book, The Furnace Girl, The Mysterious Case of Elfrieda Knaak, where Kraig lays out his theory through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy. Kraig, welcome to Spaced Out Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Everett.
I'm really excited to talk about this case, but before I do, or we do, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you learned about it, because that was kind of an interesting way to find out about this case, wasn't it?
Yeah, so our 8th grade history teacher always taught this as part of the curriculum for our 8th grade history class. So every year, probably around this time, she would talk about the most mysterious case that happened in our village hall. And you said the police station. We should clarify, too, that back in 1928, our town's village hall served as the police station, the fire station, and the village hall. So when you read articles and you hear that she was found in the police station or found in the village hall, they were all the same building. So that's how I initially learned about it. And I've been heavily involved in our history museum in town for years. And every other year we do something called the Ghost Walk, which is a way to introduce folks to history and our stories of our past in our town. And I've been one of the writers and co-producers of that particular production. And this is always the marquee scene within that Ghost Walk, where there are actors that act out what took place that night.
Oh, that is really cool. I'm going to have to get up there and check that out next year. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it involves usually anywhere from 80 to 100 community actors, and it's such a neat event. It's a great way to teach history. It's a great way for families to experience history, and it's kind of like a Christmas Carol with a Halloween spin. There's a spirit or ghoul that takes groups of 20 to 25 people around to various sites around the downtown area, and there are groups of local actors that act out these scenes. So it's kind of like that spirit from A Christmas Carol that leads everyone around. So it's a fun event to be involved in.
That sounds fantastic. So what happened in the furnace room of the police station, village hall, fire station on October 10th, 1928? What did people end up finding?
Well, again, this is everyone's speculation and guess. We can only go with what the facts are of what was known, which was on the morning of October 30th, Elfrieda Knaak, who was a 30-year-old door-to-door encyclopedia salesgirl from a neighboring town in Deerfield, Illinois, was found naked and burned in the basement of the Lake Bluff Village Hall. And this happened at 7 a.m. on the morning of October 30th.
I'm sorry, I said 10th. You're right. It is the 30th. So before this event, who was Elfrieda Knaak?
Well, Elfrieda, and you know what, too, for what it's worth, if we want to talk, her name is actually pronounced Knaak, and through all the years that I've covered this, I always thought her name was pronounced the way that you're saying it, Knaak. So if I find myself going back and forth between Knaak or Knaak, that's just because how long I've been working on this. But I found a living relative of hers, and she was quick to let me know that the proper pronunciation is Knaak. So in telling you a little bit about her, she was the youngest of 11 children born into a family in Deerfield that owned the only pharmacy in town at the time. And her father was the first doctor in the town of Deerfield. He came from Chicago. And they were a highly religious family. And again, she was the youngest of 11 children, but only 9 lived into adulthood. There were 2 that had died in infancy. She was highly musical, very religious. She loved working with children. She went to college at the University of Illinois Chicago, where she received a degree in education. And then so her first career was really a school teacher. She taught in her early 20s at Glen Flora Elementary School in Waukegan, Illinois, which is the largest city north of Lake Bluff and Deerfield. She worked as an elementary teacher from what I can tell from 1921 to 1926. And then in 1926, she then had a change of career where she decided to become a door-to-door encyclopedia sales girl, which, if you think about that, for that time, that was a pretty unusual career for a young single woman to be going door-to-door selling encyclopedias. So she worked in that career for roughly 2 years for the Compton Encyclopedia Company, and the Compton Encyclopedia Company was based in Chicago, and that eventually became bought out as the Encyclopedia Britannica later on as years progressed. So she was a young single woman. She lived at home. Kind of a strange thing, when her father had passed away in 1924, which would be 4 years before her death. She had four older sisters. Excuse me, 3 older sisters. She was one of 4 girls. She had 3 older sisters, but 2 of her older sisters also lived at home with her as well, and they lived there with her mother. So you had three daughters and their mother, and then also a brother, Alvin Knaak, who was the village clerk, who also lived in this family home. So they were a very tight-knit, Presbyterian, devout family with a family business in town in Deerfield. And surprisingly, only one of the Knaak daughters married, so the rest of the sisters lived at home.
That is definitely unusual for the time. And her whole upbringing, in a way, is a bit different than what you would expect of the typical young girl of the time, isn't it?
It is, and it's one of the things that's not really talked about in the papers. The only way that I know what I know is through diving deeper into the case and actually through Ancestry.com, reaching out to the relatives. That's how I actually I gained access to a bunch of historical photos of the Knaak family that I didn't even know existed through finding some relatives of hers. And that it's really where I learned more about their faith and more about how integrated they were in the community of Deerfield. That they were, when you read some of the things online in Reddit or in web sleuths, they say that they were a very prestigious and that she came from a very wealthy family. She didn't come from a wealthy family. They were a hardworking German immigrant family. Both her mother and father came straight from Germany, and her father was a doctor, but again, trained as a doctor, but really a pharmacist. So they had money, but they weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, if you go to Deerfield, Illinois, and you go to the graveyard where the family is all buried, their tombstones are very, very modest. You know, they're not what you would expect for folks who would have been the pillars of a community.
Okay. You had mentioned that they were a very religious family, and one of the things that I found interesting is that Elfrieda had a deep interest in spiritualism. Was the entire family involved in spiritualism, or was it just her?
I would say it was just her. As a matter of fact, after this took place, her family members were shocked that she had even potentially gotten involved with what was called the refiner's fire, which is really the refiner's fire is really a process by which religiously until you know the corresponding depths of pain, you can't fully know God's love and have a connection with God. And so, you know, there were some very devout people really connected into their religious beliefs that felt by burning themselves, this is the way you get to know God, and God sees you, and this is almost like your sacrifice to him. But she seemed, you know, this information was never shared with her sisters or her brothers. They didn't know anything about it. It would almost seem to be something of kind of a secret that she kept from the family.
Was spiritualism popular in the Lake Bluff area, the Waukegan area?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say the Lake Bluff area or Waukegan. I would say the entire United States. I mean, you know, you have to realize that in the 1920s, you know, even Houdini's act, a lot of folks always think of him as a magician, but part of his act was this whole spiritualism act, where connecting with people from beyond and spirits and people who have passed, and that was, you know, look at it today. We have kind of the Long Island medium, right? I mean, that was kind of that same movement that was going on in the 1920s. There were a lot of folks that were very interested in religion, in God, and with trying to connect with God and also with people who had passed. And that wasn't just here, that was everywhere.
Okay. So let's start out sort of at the beginning of this case here, because on that day, her movements were a little different than usual, weren't they? She had some plans and kind of changed them and did some things that she wouldn't normally do, or her family wasn't expecting her to do, didn't she?
Yeah, so it wasn't on the 30th, it was the day before. So on October 29th, she was discovered on the morning of the 30th, but the day before, on the 29th, she had basically a regular routine day. She had stopped by the pharmacy, the local family business that they had, and then she had taken a train from Deerfield to Chicago, where she was one of the presenters at the Compton Encyclopedia Company to a bunch of the rest of the sales folks to talk about her sales techniques. And she was one of the top door-to-door salesmen for her time, and so she was one of the lead speakers for that. So she was a part of this conference. During the lunch break, she had made a call back home to one of her sisters. I believe it was I think it was Emily. There was Ida and Emily. They were 48 and 50 years of age, so they were about 20 years older than Elfrieda. And they were also both musical, and she had told them that she had bought some sheet music at the local music store, and that she would be home roughly around 7:30 or 8 o'clock that night, and they could have a good sing. So that was the last that her family members heard of her. And then the next day, they received this phone call from Lake Bluff that she was found naked and burned in the basement of the village hall.
Okay. Now, she purchased the music or went to the music store in a town called Highland Park, right?
Incorrect. No, she purchased the sheet music in Chicago. That's where she that's where she was working that day. That's where the conferences were. So, no, you're getting that slightly mixed up. There was a music store in Highland Park that the main suspect, Charles Hitchcock, who we'll get to, his wife worked at. So I think that's where you might be a little mixed on the facts.
Okay, so she doesn't get home when she's expected. What happens that night with her family? Or is there nothing unusual, or do they seem concerned? Are there any police reports?
Yeah, that's a great question. So she finishes work at 6 o'clock, and she jumps the electric interurban train, which was how all the trains in Chicago ran at that time. They were electric railway. And she takes the train from Chicago to Highland Park. Now, from Highland Park was the closest town to Deerfield where she lived. It was about 2.5 miles away, and there was a bus that ran from Highland Park to her home. So she gets into the Highland Park train station around 7:30, and she hears from the attendant that the bus has broken down and that it's probably a 2-hour delay. So at that point, the train station attendant notices that she uses the phone in the train station to make 2 phone calls, and she talks in whispers. She's, he can't hear what those conversations were, and then she ends up buying a round-trip ticket from the Highland Park station to Lake Bluff, where she's found, and she also checked her bag with her books, with her encyclopedias. So she clearly got a claim check and a round-trip ticket, which is why everyone is including myself, is really kind of confused by that, because if her intention was to go to the Lake Bluff Village Hall and burn herself, why would you buy a round-trip ticket? Why wouldn't you just buy a single ticket, right, a one-way? But for whatever reason, she did. Now, I had always wondered, and everyone had wondered, where those phone calls were made to. And one of the things, again, in the Waukegan Daily newspaper that covered this event day by day, and would oftentimes have 2 and 3 articles a day about this case, divulged to me was that they actually traced where those phone calls went. And where she placed those phone calls to was to the Lake Bluff Village Hall, to the police station, and so she called there first to clearly see if anyone was there, and then after that, that's when she purchased her round trip ticket. But strangely enough, she never calls home to tell any of her family members about this. Now, I've always kind of said it's so you if you're in the city and you call home and you tell everyone you're going to be home around 7 or 7:30 that night, and you get to the train station and you find out the bus is broken down, wouldn't you use that same telephone to call your family and say, the bus is broken down, I'm here, could somebody else come pick me up? Is there another way of getting home? She doesn't, she never calls home. She never contacts anyone about that, which is kind of one of the mysteries of the story.
And this is where we begin, I guess, to kind of bring in one of the prime suspects, because didn't the station master at the Lake Bluff train station remember her being in the train station?
Yeah, there's one newspaper that recounts that they saw her get off at the Lake Bluff train station. And that's an important fact, because there were some folks that thought she never took the train. There were some folks that thought that she was picked up and driven to Lake Bluff and beaten and left for dead. So the fact that there is one attendant that remembers seeing her get off the train in Lake Bluff, proves that she did indeed take the train there.
Would it be unusual, though, for a station master to remember one specific person? Was there enough traffic there, or it just seems to me a little unusual that he might remember one specific individual.
Sure. Well, that's a great point. I think to keep in mind a couple things. One, Lake Bluff right now, year 2019, we have 6,000 people that reside here. In 1928, there were about 750 people that lived here. So it wasn't like there was a lot of traffic of everyday commuters getting off at the train station. You know, if you were to go up to Lake Bluff right now and see who is getting off the train, there's maybe 12 or 13 people that are getting off in 2019. My sense is at nighttime, when she came into town, which would have been around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, there probably were 2, maybe 3 people that probably got off that train. So it would have been easy for that attendant to spot and notice who was getting off the train and who was getting on.
What about the idea that Charles Hitchcock, the person who was the prime suspect in this for a long time, was at the train station around the same time or at the same time that she arrived?
No, there was no way that he was at the train station at that time. Charles Hitchcock was, according to his statements, was at home. He had broken his ankle a week before this had taken place, and was at home and had an alibi that his kids said that he was at home, and also one of his good friends, Oscar Clower, who was also an entertainer and knew Hitchcock from their early days in Chicago and their entertainment years, had stopped by for a drink and had said that he had been with Hitchcock around 10 or 10:30, for a half hour. So he was not at the train station. Now who was at the Highland Park train station was Hitchcock's wife. Charles Hitchcock's wife, Estelle Hitchcock, worked as a accountant, and there was a music store that she worked for in Highland Park where she went to work in the evenings and did the books. And she was the person that took the train from Lake Bluff to Highland Park. Now, what I've always potentially suspected or thought was possibly the reason why Elfrieda Knaak came to Lake Bluff, because she saw Estelle Hitchcock get off the train station. Because if you follow the timeline on this, if Elfrieda took the train from Chicago to Highland Park, that would have put her in Highland Park around 7:30 p.m. At roughly 8 p.m. would be when Estelle Hitchcock arrives at that same train station coming from Lake Bluff. Now, Hitchcock and Elfrieda Knaak later on are rumored to have been romantically involved. And so if that is true, and if you believe that, could she have seen her mistress's wife, getting off that train, that then prompted her to decide to go to the village hall where she thought Charles was working that night?
Okay, Kraig, I'm going to get you to hold on for just a second, and we are going to step out for a quick break on Spaced Out Radio.
Looking for the stories
Sundays
of the strange and weird that you will find hard to find anywhere else? Check out the SOR Newswire on our website. Our writers, led by Captain Shirk, are scouring the world for the oddest and most bizarre stories we can find. Everything from weird crime to suspenseful and paranormal. We're working hard for you to bring you the most intriguing news of your day. Check out the SOR Newswire at spacedoutradio.com today.
Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey Spaced Out Radio fans, it's John Resig, founder of the CHIVE and CHIVE Charities. We live in a world of mystery and uncertainty, which you guys know better than anyone. Sometimes you just need to be brought back down to earth for a while. One of the best ways to stay grounded is to help out with your fellow earthlings. and there's no more rewarding way to do that than to give through CHIVE Charities. Unlike many organizations, we don't necessarily aim to save the world, cure disease, or change the course of history. Our goal is to make the life of veterans, first responders, and those with rare medical conditions 10% happier. We do this by donating one grant item, ranging from vans to therapy programs to prosthetic limbs, to those who need it most. CHIVE Charities is nothing without our donors, an amazing group of underdogs helping underdogs. To contribute to Spaced Out Radio's official charity, head over to chivecharities.org and become a donor today.
Are you addicted to the woo? Good. Me too. This is Dave Scott, and you can woo it up with me every Monday through Friday, starting at 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, for 3 hours of great entertainment in the subjects you love. UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, intuition. Yes, we hit it all 5 days a week. Look for us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, my friends, we own the night.
You wanted new SOR gear, and now you can have it. The SOR Vault is fully stocked with t-shirts, hats, hoodies, mugs, and everything in between, with great logos for you to choose from. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com, click on the SOR Vault, and go shopping. Pricing is quite affordable, and you can look good representing your favorite show. So go to our website and pick up your new SOR wear at the SOR Vault today.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Move over, brother, and let me own Saturday night.
This is Rich Giordano, and I'm inviting you to tune on in to Spaced Out Saturdays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, where I'm going to bust open the lids on everything paranormal. Why? Because we want answers, and I'm the guy who's going to deliver those answers to you. Join the chat rooms, and we'll see you this Saturday. Just be there. No, really.
From the heartlands of Canada to beards around the world, we know how to take care of you. Fill your follicles with the Mighty Moose Beard Oil. All our oils and balms are handmade and 100% natural ingredients because we care about your beard. And hey, use the promo code SOR2019 and get your Mighty Moose Beard Oil today. You can check us out on our website, mightymoosebeard.com.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio, and while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens, or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio. Looking for something new to push your limits? Look Beyond the Spectrum, a new docuseries featuring some of the best researchers in the world when it comes to everything from UFOs, government cover-ups, and strange humanoids. Truth seekers Stephen Bassett, Jeff Meldrum, Jack Kasher, and Stanton Friedman, among others, all chip in to bring their knowledge to you. Beyond the Spectrum can be found on Amazon as well as Tubi TV. Tell us what you think on our Amazon page.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sundays. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Don't forget, if you've missed any part of the show, you can check out our archives, always for free, at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping in the brand new SOR Vault, hanging out with some space travelers, and so much more. We are talking with Kraig Moreland about his book, the Elfrieda. It's about Elfrieda Knaak, and I'll tell you, I am very excited about this. I've been fascinated with this case for a long time, and one of the things we started to get into before the break was the sort of the prime suspect in this, and his name was Charles Hitchcock. And Kraig, can you expand on who Charles Hitchcock was a little bit?
Sure. So at the time that this took place, Charles Hitchcock was a 45-year-old gentleman who lived in Lake Bluff, 2 blocks from the Village Hall. But in his earlier days, Hitchcock was a former silent movie actor. He was a vaudeville entertainer. And right at the time that silent movies were really starting to boom, Hitchcock was a part of a couple different movie companies and starred, and was also just a regular actor in their acting company in some of these films. Now, he actually, interestingly enough, acted with Charlie Chaplin in one film. Chaplin, for part of his career, had signed a contract with S&E Studios in Chicago, and so Chaplin was here in Chicago, and Hitchcock and Chaplin are actually in a movie together that in Lake Bluff we have a clip of it of the two of them together. So what ended up happening is many of the folks from the acting company all went out west. They went out to California and went on to fame and riches, and Hitchcock stayed back in Chicago and ended up basically amounting to nothing. So he became kind of this washed-up, struggling actor. So because of his theatrical backgrounds, he pieced together a living doing several different things. One, he was an entertainer. He'd be a guy that you would hire to come speak at a club, and he'd do impressions and a variety of characters as part of his act or bit. He also worked as an elocution teacher, which elocution is nothing different than like a Dale Carnegie self-help course on how you would talk or present or sell, and he ran that course at a YMCA in Waukegan, Illinois. So he pieced together a living doing several things. He was an entertainer. He taught elocution lessons, and then he also worked as the night policeman at our Village Hall. So where this connection all comes into play is when Miss Knaak is brought to the hospital, because when she's found, she's still alive. At that point, she's mumbling, "Hitch, oh Hitch," and they're trying to figure out who she's talking about. And it's then later discovered that Elfrieda, as part of her sales training for her encyclopedia sales, had been taking courses with Charles Hitchcock at the YMCA in order to better her sales skills. And in addition to taking his courses, she also happened to be getting private lessons from him, which were done at the Village Hall when he was on duty as the night policeman. So that's where he becomes thrust into the spotlight as the lead suspect, because his is the name that she is mumbling as she's being taken to the hospital. And then when it's found that he was her teacher and that she was being given private tutoring lessons at the Village Hall while he was on duty, that's where he becomes the lead suspect in this case.
I think people may not know that back in the silent movie era, long before there was a Hollywood, Chicago was kind of the equivalent of what Hollywood is today. It was a very movie-centric town. Charlie Chaplin produced or acted in many of the movies here, or they were made here. So you hinted on it a little bit that he came to Chicago to work with the movie companies, or was he a native of Chicago or the Chicagoland area?
He signed a contract for a 1-year contract, and keep in mind at those times when you signed a contract, you didn't work on 2 or 3 movies in a year like how some movie stars now work. You do like 45 movies in a year. So, the movies were much shorter. They were, 5-minute shorts, 7-minute shorts, oftentimes, so he had signed in for a year. And the studio that he was with was S&E Studios. That was kind of one of the big movie producing studios of silent films back in the day. And you're right, they were based out of Chicago. This is long before the big movement goes to Hollywood. So you're correct.
How did he come about being the night watchman or police officer for the town?
Good question. Now, I know a lot about this case, but that has never really been asked. I'm just assuming that he probably applied for the job. We're talking a very, very small town. Lake Bluff started as a resort community. It was where Lake Bluff is right on the lake shore, just north of Chicago, 30 miles, and it's really a town that started where folks during the mid to late 1800s came during the summers to escape the city. People had free time and for the very first time, and so this is where many folks had their summer homes or cottages where they came north of the city. So, Barney Rosenhagen, who is the police chief in Lake Bluff, he not only serves as the police chief, he serves as the water guy. He serves as the Parks and Recreation guy. You've got he was the fire marshal and he was the police chief, right? So you've got one guy holding 4 different jobs. So this is, again, very small town, mid-America, 1920s. And Barney Rosenhagen, who was the police chief, was never trained in any police work, and neither was Charles Hitchcock. You're really just talking about some people that you wanted to be responsible, to be doing the rounds and to kind of look after the town and make sure doors were locked, and if anyone was away, that their homes were being looked after. That's pretty much what law enforcement was back in the 1920s in this little town. So it didn't take much to fill that position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, he had an office where he taught these self-improvement courses and sales courses somewhere near the train station. Is that correct?
No, his where he taught his elocution course was in Waukegan, Illinois, which again is where the Waukegan Daily News was out of. Well, Waukegan was the largest city north of Chicago at the time. You had Chicago, you had Waukegan, and then you have Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So in the city of Waukegan, there was a YMCA, and Hitchcock had a studio there where he taught his elocution classes. There wasn't anything near the train station. But because he was a night policeman, he also kind of double dipped, right? While he was working and doing rounds around town and taking any calls that anyone might have at the village hall / police station, he clearly was also offering private lessons while he was there at night because there wasn't much going on, right? So that's he worked at the police station at night as a police night watchman, but he was also double dipping and clearly doing private tutoring lessons on the side there too.
Do you know how Elfrieda Knaak came about finding about his services or his courses? Because back in those days, wouldn't it have been a bit unusual for a woman to travel that distance alone to take a course like that?
I don't have any knowledge of how she came to know about taking his courses, but keep in mind, this is after World War I, right? And after World War I ends, you've got all these young men who came back from service overseas, that are looking to be educated and looking to take courses and things that will help them gain employment after being away. And so YMCAs at that time in our country's history were like learning centers for everybody, right? This was where young 20-somethings or 19-year-olds went to get training, technical training in things like public speaking if they were trying to get a sales job, technical training in other skill sets. If you wanted to learn how to play a musical instrument, I know the person in the studio next to Hitchcock's taught violin lessons. So, and YMCAs had swimming pools. You were taught, if you didn't know how to swim, there were swimming lessons. So they were really educational places. So my guess is, Elfrieda Knaak fell in line with the type of folks that were looking for self-improvement. She probably saw an ad somewhere for elocution lessons and where they could be taught, and that was at the local YMCA, and I think that's how they became connected.
Right. How does a romantic relationship play into this here? I believe there's a little bit of debate, and I want to tackle that before we kind of discuss how the police investigation went. But was there or was there not a romantic relationship between Hitchcock and Knaak?
Well, Hitchcock completely denies it. He says, actually, at the coroner's inquest after Elfrieda Knaak's death and the days leading up to her death, that he had no idea that she was in love with him. He states that this was clearly a young pupil's crush on her teacher, and that he's happily married, and he knows nothing about this. Okay, now what you have to know about after the fact is, and this is what is not covered in the headlines of these newspapers, right? So at the Lake Bluff History Museum about 10 years ago, we end up getting in touch with Hitchcock's second wife's niece, okay? So after this all takes place, Hitchcock's wife divorces him over everything that was kind of wrong with their family, and that he was accused of being romantically involved in this woman and with this woman Elfrieda, and so he leaves town, and who he ends up marrying is a woman named Marie Mueller, who we can get into later on. And Marie had a niece, and this niece reached out to us at the History Museum, and we have letters that this niece wrote, and she ends up stating that Hitchcock, Elfrieda Knaak, and her aunt, the three of them, were in a love triangle, and that Hitchcock was romantically involved with Elfrieda at the time, despite denying it when he testified at the coroner's inquest, and despite what he had said in the newspapers. Now, again, that's where when you get into going to web sleuths or going to Reddit and reading some of these things, if you just take at face value what the headlines say, A, they were reported incorrectly most of the time, but B, you really have to know what happened 10 years after this and live in town and hear what people were talking about to really fully understand this. And there was clearly a romantic relationship that was taking place between Charles Hitchcock and Elfrieda Knaak, and with Elfrieda's best friend, Marie Mueller.
Is there any truth to the idea that Elfrieda Knaak told a doctor that she was in love with Hitchcock and afraid that he was going to go back to his wife?
So when she's brought to Lake Forest Hospital, which was called the Alice Home at that time, she lives for 4 days. And during that time period, she tells staff, she tells family members a variety of different stories. But she had told them that she was in love with Charles Hitchcock, but she never states what you said at the end. She never states that he was going to go back to his wife or anything like that. That was nothing that ever came out of her mouth.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about what happened at the hospital. But before we do that, can you tell me what the police theory was when this was discovered and initially investigated? Let's talk about how that all played out.
Sure. Well, like you would normally think, if there's a naked woman found burned in the basement of a public building, you would naturally think that she had been raped, beaten, and left there to die, right? And so when you start looking at the initial headlines of this case, the day and the second day after it took place, all the headlines are beaten woman, electrocuted woman, victimized, woman. So they all thought that Elfrieda Knaak, this woman, was possibly raped, beaten, and drugged to the village hall to die. So that's what most of the headlines talked about at that time. It wasn't until she got to the hospital and reporters started hearing reports that she was saying, "I did this to myself," where everyone was like, "Whoa, wait a second, wait, she did this to herself?" And that's when the headlines start to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and her injuries would be very difficult for somebody to cause to themselves, wouldn't it?
That's about a 2-hour conversation, but it's that was a lot of the speculation was that there was no way that one person could do this to themselves, including the physician that treated her. Now, there were two physicians, Dr. Rissinger and Dr. Proxmire. Okay, these were two local physicians in Lake Bluff and Lake Forest. They both worked at the hospital, and so it's Dr. Proxmire's opinion and what's stated in the newspapers that initially, like after the second day, that he says there's no way that a person can do this, could have done this to herself. There's no way, because you have to also understand the extent of her injuries. Her fingers were basically burned off to the knuckles, so she had no fingernails, and her fingers were burned off basically the first 2 inches of them. Her toes were completely burned off from her feet and were burned and charred to the bone. And then the back of her scalp was also burned. So she had major burn injuries that would only happen like if you were to stick your hand into a bed of coals for 3 to 5 minutes. That's how long it would have taken for her to do this if she did it herself. So that's where the initial theory was, look, there is no way this person did this to themselves.
Where does the idea of her being electrocuted doesn't come into this until the autopsy, correct?
Correct, yes. So here's where that happens is if you read the newspapers after the autopsy, there were a group of physicians that all were a part of that. And at the Waukegan Hospital, which was called Victory Memorial Hospital at the time in 1928, they hold this big press conference, right? And you've got all these doctors that were a part of the autopsy or are hearing the findings of the autopsy that are all weighing in on this. And one of the physicians who weighs in on it says, well, it sounds like the extent of her injuries, that she had blood vessels that had exploded, would only come through electrocution injuries. And this was a physician that worked in the field in World War I, and he just stated that it sounded as if these could have been electrical burns. So then everyone starts thinking, okay, well, maybe she was tortured. Maybe she was electrocuted, either with the electric interurban rail line, or there was also a power station across the street from the village hall. So they checked the power station at the village hall, nothing, no tampering. And you also have to understand that electrical lines back at that time in 1928, they didn't run the way the current Chicago subways do with a third electrical line. You know, if you fall on an electrical track now in 2019, you will be electrocuted to death in Chicago. But the electricity that supplied power for the trains came from above. They were all on cable, and the cable connected to the car below. So there's no way, unless someone drug her up to the top, drug her to the top of a tower, electrocuted her and brought her down, that wouldn't go. So that's where the electrocution theory comes in, but there was no merit to it. It was just because there was one physician weighing in on it, and then that becomes a headline, right? These reporters just pick up on one thing one doctor says, and then that becomes fact.
If she were to do this by herself, how difficult would it have been for her? The way you describe it, I imagine her almost having to stick her hand in the furnace and then a foot in the furnace and maybe another foot in the furnace and almost climb in and out. And that sounds horrendously painful, not to mention, wasn't the furnace door a bit high for somebody her size to do something like that?
It wasn't that it was high. The opening was 9 3/4 by 12 3/4. So you're talking something the size of a microwave oven, okay? That was the only opening that was available to her. And you'd have to see the furnace to understand it, but really there were coals that sat on a screen, much like, think of it like a grill that you would grill on. And those coals then were accessible through that 9 3/4 by 12 3/4 opening. So, yeah, it would have been difficult. She didn't climb into the furnace if she did this herself. She states that she stuck her head in, which the opening was wide enough and big enough for one to put their head in, and then put her feet in one at a time, and then did her hands.
Oh, that sounds horrendously painful and very, very hard to do. Kraig, we've just got a couple of seconds here left before we go to break. I'm going to ask you to hold on. We're going to step out, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the death of Elfrieda Knaak.
John Resig here, founder of CHIVE Charities. And just like you, we have a penchant for the uncommon, the overlooked, and the off-the-cuff. CHIVE Charities operates a bit differently than most organizations. We listen to our recipients to find out exactly what they need, and then we give it to them. We provide people with rare medical conditions, veterans, and first responders with grant items that will make a direct impact on that person's life. We don't just forget about our recipients when the van or the wheelchair has been delivered, though. Our recipients are part of our CHIVE Charities family for life. By becoming a donor with us, you could be a part of that family too. And our listeners of Spaced Out Radio know that thinking differently can be a very good thing. To get to know some of our recipients and to support Spaced Out Radio's official charity, head over to chivecharities.org and start making a real difference today.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot THAL. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
At spacedoutradio.com, we have a little bit of everything for you to stay up late. So while you're there, check out our SOR Newswire, where our team brings you stories of the weird and strange to the WTF from around the globe. News on Bigfoot, UFOs, paranormal, Darwinian-type crime tales. It's the stories that the mainstream media usually won't touch. Well, we got them all on the SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Come hang out with me, Little Richie G, as I take over the airwaves on Spaced Out Saturdays. This is Rich Giordano, and I'm going to bring you the most fun on the radio you can have with your clothes on. We're going to get to the heart of the subjects from UFOs to what's going on in the paranormal and everything in between. So come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, for the fastest 3 hours of your week.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at MightyMooseBeard.com today.
Looking for something new to push your limits? Look Beyond the Spectrum, a new docuseries featuring some of the best researchers in the world when it comes to everything from UFOs, government cover-ups, and strange humanoids. Truth seekers Stephen Bassett, Jeff Meldrum, Jack Kasher, and Stanton Friedman, among others, all chip in to bring their knowledge to you. Beyond the Spectrum can be found on Amazon as well as Tubi TV. Tell us what you think on our Amazon page.
Are you having encounters with the paranormal, supernatural, or ufological that you cannot explain? Look no further than the SOR Sightlines Report, brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. This is Ryan Stacy, head of the Research Association, TESA. Soon on the Spaced Out Radio website, you'll be able to file your reports and have them researched for you. We are independent and ready to help Spaced Out Radio listeners today.
Hi, this is Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we store all of the SOR show archives for free. And as an added bonus, every 2 weeks I'm posting brand new content on Cryptid Tales, where I will get into some of the spookier legends and folklore from around the world and tell the stories that go with them. Find us at youtube.com/spacedoutradio and check out Cryptid Tales today. Drop a comment and let me know what you want to hear. See you there.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I'm bringing you the Woo every Monday through Friday on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going all out to bring you the strangest, oddest stories and subjects I could find for your entertainment. Why? Because when we hit peak Woo, I know I've done my job. So come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com, 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, and together, my friends, we own the night.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. I'm your host, Everett Beamer. Thank you for sticking around with us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates, KDNF, AM 1560 in Dangerfield, Texas, KDUN, AM 1030 in Reedsport, Oregon, KZFX 93.7 FM in Ridgecrest, California, WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, and UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans. On the digital side, we are on Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. Don't forget, you can check out our archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping at the Spaced Out Radio store, and reading up on the SOR Newswire, where you can find Dave's weekly blog and so much more. We are joined tonight by Kraig Moreland, and we're talking about his book, The Furnace Girl, The Mysterious Case of Elfrieda Knaak, where he lays out some facts and ideas about this death that took place in Lake Bluff, Illinois. And we were talking about the prime suspect at the start of this investigation and kind of what happened. Keith, can we kind of pick this up where we left it off with how hard it would be to do this herself?
Sure. And also, not to embarrass you, you're letting your Cub allegiance come through because you're calling me Kraig Moreland instead of Kraig Moreland. That's right. It's Kraig with a K, so it happens all the time. Everyone thinks I'm Kraig Moreland, but I could actually catch a pop fly and Kraig Moreland couldn't, so that's the difference on the two.
I'm sorry for that. I hope that was the only time it happened.
It's the only time, and I don't take offense to it. It's not a big deal. I just figured before it went any further, I'd make mention of it. So, all right. So, as far as her injuries and how difficult it would have been, the physician at the time who was treating her at the hospital said that this would be nearly impossible for a person to do this. That what she said she did was that she first stuck her head in the furnace, and then put her right foot in and burned that, put her left foot in and did that, and then burned her right hand and then her left hand. Now, the furnace, you have to understand also, was a furnace, but it actually is what is referred to as a water-fed a gravity-fed water boiler. And what its purpose was to provide hot water throughout the village hall. So one of the things that I discovered in my research was this wasn't the only furnace in the village hall. There was actually a larger furnace right next to this that the job of that was to provide heat for the entire building. The furnace that she was burned in was indeed a furnace. It was a coal furnace, but it was really a water heater. So that becomes an interesting fact when you get into why there wasn't any odor in the building, because the police chief, who then takes over in the case, Chief Spade, always suspected that she was burned elsewhere. He said that there's no way that she was burned in the village hall, because if she was, the whole building would have smelled of burnt flesh, similar to if you took a burger, right? If you did that inside. But here's the thing that you have to understand. If she was burned in the actual large furnace that heated the building, he's right. That air would have circulated throughout the entire building. But this furnace just provided hot water. So unless odor can travel through water and pipes, you're not going to smell burned flesh throughout the building. So that was one of the theories that was debunked was, oh, well, she couldn't have been burned there because they would have smelled burned flesh throughout the building. Well, there was no way of that air circulating from the basement through the building. That's why they didn't smell it. So, but the extent of her injuries were extremely unusual. I mean, if she were to do this to herself, folks thought the only way that she could have done this would have been through self-hypnosis or with the assistance of someone helping her with hypnotizing her. So that's where you get into the second assistance of another person. And one of the key things that she says while she's at the hospital was that this was a pact that she had made with another person, and that she went through it alone. So at that point then, that's when they start thinking, is there another person who was involved in this? Because if she says there was a pact, but she went through it alone, was there a second person involved, and is she covering for that other person?
Now, this was possibly a suicide pact with another woman potentially involved in spirituality, right?
Correct, right. And no one knew who this person was until basically 2 weeks after the coroner's inquest. So she says this in the hospital. She says this was a test by fire for the spirit of love, and that this was a pact with another person. But they don't know who this other person is. So fast forward to the middle of November, 2 weeks after the coroner's inquest, and the family is cleaning out her belongings in her room in the family home, and they come across these letters from this person, B. Locke. And it's clear in reading these letters that this B. Locke was a woman that she had sold books to in another neighboring town to Lake Bluff called Libertyville. And there were letters back and forth between these two that seemed to be that of a romantic nature. So, and when you read these letters, they are absolutely bizarre. She is, saying, when you came to my door, you mastered me, and I noticed that these books, when I wanted to ship them back to you, I couldn't do it because I could tell they were really you. And, it's just a very, very strange exchange of letters. And so the state's attorney go to the address where this is listed, where these letters originated from. And this B. Locke was really writing under a pen name. Her real name was Luella Rowe, and she was a married woman to a contractor in Libertyville, Illinois. And what had happened was Elfrieda had gone to her door selling her encyclopedias door to door, and they struck up some type of relationship. It's also very clear in the letter exchange that she had purchased books and wanted to return them, and then Elfrieda was not too excited about this, right? So that's where that connection comes in. But within those letters, they talk about having the strength to go through with this, and they were both very religious, and so she becomes a suspect then in the case. But after questioning, the state's attorney releases her. The state's attorney basically says there's no proof that this woman was involved in this, and they still stick with the coroner's verdict, which was by suicide.
Was there any evidence or indication that she had been in Lake Bluff at the time?
No, there is no evidence of that. And all that's written in the papers, in the Waukegan paper, was that she was brought in for questioning and that she was released. I never found any facts that said that her husband testified on her behalf as an alibi, that she was home that night. I never really found anything that stated why she was released and no longer a suspect, other than that they just felt after questioning there wasn't enough evidence to tie her into the case.
Wow, that's surprising, because if the letters seem to have those kind of indications, that seems to definitely warrant some more investigation.
You would think, but in this particular case, they didn't. The thing that I found more amazing in researching this was Hitchcock is always synonymous with this case. When you Google Elfrieda Knaak or Furnace Death, Lake Bluff, Elfrieda Knaak's picture comes up, and right next to that is Charles Hitchcock's picture. But really, who was more of a suspect than Charles Hitchcock was the police chief, Barney Rosenhagen. And the reason for that was Hitchcock had been off work for a week prior to this taking place. And so since he was off, the police chief, who was, again, also the village maintenance guy and the fire chief and, another job, he assumed Hitchcock's night duties, and that was doing the rounds around town, locking and securing the village hall, and then, making sure everything was closed up. So if you think about it, Barney Rosenhagen, the police chief, was the last person to lock the village hall. He was also the first person to open the village hall the next day. He and the janitor were the ones that discovered her, and he was also the person to tell the janitor to throw all the ashes from the coal furnace away. So that's why when the sheriff got involved in this case and they started investigating this, they saw Barney Rosenhagen as more of a suspect than Charles Hitchcock, because Rosenhagen was the last to lock the building, he was the first to open the building, and he destroyed all the evidence.
Did he? It sounds like a stupid question, but did he have an alibi for the evening?
He did not, and it's actually where this case becomes even more and more strange is he dies in mid-December of heart failure due to the amount of stress that the case started taking on his life. So he was an elderly guy in his early 70s, but he had heart problems, and the stress of this case led to his death. So, it was basically a week after the coroner's inquest that the village officials relieve him of his duties. They accept Charles Hitchcock's resignation, and they hire police chief or deputy Spade, who was the other person that worked there. There was Rosenhagen, Hitchcock, and Spade. And Spade was a young 24-year-old motorcycle patrolman on the force, and they appoint Spade the new police chief. So Rosenhagen's out, and so is Hitchcock. So, and then you have Rosenhagen dying shortly after this.
Would Rosenhagen have had any motive in this, or was he connected to the Knaak family or Elfrieda in any way?
He wasn't connected to the Knaak family, but what everyone saw as his motive was there were folks that thought that Hitchcock wanted Rosenhagen's job. So Rosenhagen is close to retirement, and so there was some theory that some folks were saying that they were trying to set him up to make him look bad so he would be fired. Hitchcock was, so that Hitchcock would get his job. That Hitchcock would become the new police chief. What folks didn't what Hitchcock didn't figure out, though, is that he was going to be the one that was going to be pinned to this due to his relationship with this woman.
How does the chief of police be the first one to discover her, disposes of the ashes? How does all this happen back in that time period? And it doesn't seem like there was a very serious investigation regarding him. Was it?
Well, the thing that you have to understand is none of these folks were trained in police work. These were local folks that lived in the village that were all kind of job sharing this role as a policeman. Rosenhagen was an immigrant off the boat and had no formal police training whatsoever. So his alibi was that he was just doing what was normal protocol. In the morning, they shoveled out the ashes from the furnace and they dumped them out in the backyard, and that was daily protocol. So he didn't think of the fact that this was a crime scene, right? He just thought, like, okay, there was this girl discovered. I've notified the sheriff, and we'll empty out the ashes the way we usually do each day. So it was really out of just negligence and being naive.
So Elfrieda is on her deathbed. She's lying in the hospital. She's burned. She's injured. She makes a lot of interesting statements during her brief time in the hospital. What were some of the things that she had said?
Well, she kept saying, oh, Hitch, over and over. She says a lot of things that she did this to herself, that she did this for purity, for love, as a test of mind over matter, and to show her commitment to God, right? She also, in her final hours, says that Frank threw me down, and so then everyone starts keying in on who is this Frank person that she was speaking of, and also says, why did they do this to me? So this is where we get the contradicting stories. Now, what I would share, though, is many of those contradicting stories really, when you go back on the timeline, happen closer to the time of her death. So, where those headlines appear are the November 1st, the November 2nd newspapers, and then she dies November 2nd. So, as one's body is shutting down, as one is closer to death, when one is heavily medicated on morphine, which she was, as her body was being poisoned, because when you die of burns, what kills you is the infection. That's what kills you. It's not the pain. It's the infection in your body, and that your body is losing its fight to fight off that. So she was being slowly poisoned, and so with that, that's where many of these comments, though, came up, and those become headlines in the newspaper. And you also have to keep in mind that newspapers at that time were like the National Enquirer is now. The more they could fabricate and the more they could sensationalize, the more they could sell newspapers, right? And so with that, you've got, when you look at some of the stranger things she says, it's closer to her death. The things, if I'm looking at this as a detective and I'm looking at this as let's taking the facts, what I'm looking at is what she said the first 2 days that she was brought into the hospital, and that is really that she did this to herself, that she did this to prove power of mind over matter, and that she did this because of her religious beliefs in the refiner's fire, and how she was going to prove to God how important he was by self-immolating herself.
Okay, so she passes away, and there's an inquest held by a jury, and that's where her spiritual beliefs kind of come back up again, don't they?
Correct, yes. So November 7th is when the coroner's inquest is held, and I've been asked about this. Are coroner's inquests a common thing? And the answer is yes. Back in the 20s, inquests were held all the time on one's death, and they're still held today. You can go online and Google. There are coroner's inquests held in the year 2019 still to this day. Does that answer your question? I forgot the initial part of what you were asking. I have to apologize.
Well, her brother at the inquest, didn't he say that he believed that she did this as a purification?
Correct, yeah. Her brother Alvin states that this is what she told him. So, yeah, her own brother testified that he felt she had burned herself. But here's the thing that you have to understand about the Knaak brothers. They weren't as much concerned. So after the coroner's inquest, they hire George Hargrave from the Hargrave Detective Agency to take up this case, because they feel that the state's attorney was not doing due diligence in the case. But the reason why they did that was not because they suspected Hitchcock was guilty of killing their sister. What they felt was that they felt that one of the brothers made the comment. He said in the newspaper, "We want the person held responsible who was morally responsible for our sister's death." And I thought that was a really interesting point, and something that you don't hear about these days, is that they wanted the person who was morally responsible for their sister's death. They felt that someone had convinced her to do this. They felt that someone had maybe persuaded her to do this, and that's who they wanted brought to court. And to me, it borders along that. There was a case in Wisconsin about a year or two back, and I don't remember all the specifics on it, but remember there was that young man who committed suicide, and there was a woman who was texting him and almost encouraging him to go through with it, and she was brought to trial on murder charges. And really, to me, it was the same thing the Knaak brothers were looking for their sister. They felt, in that same case, they wanted that woman from Wisconsin morally held responsible for the death of that young man. She didn't do anything to kill him, but they felt that she was morally irresponsible for trying to encourage himself to kill himself. And that was the same thing that the Knaak brothers wanted in this case, and that's oftentimes missed when you're looking at all this, is they wanted the person that was morally responsible. Was that Charles Hitchcock? Was this a guy who was taking advantage of their sister that she was romantically in love with, and that he encouraged her to do this? Was this B. Locke? This woman that had that she had some type of relationship with? That's really what the Knaak brothers wanted.
So did they believe then that she committed suicide, but how did they how did they justify that with the wounds not being able to be caused by oneself? That's a horrible way to ask that question.
Well, I think I understand what you're saying. The verdict was given. Actually, what they were hoping for was that by hiring Hargrave, he would find more evidence that it would reopen the case. Does that? I think that probably answers what you're asking.
Yeah, it does. I think as a person, many people would have a hard time saying, we understand it was suicide, but we believe other people were responsible for it. I think they would consider that murder.
They just wanted who was morally responsible for their sister's death held accountable. And that's just, we're in a time where no one ever wants to accept responsibility due to that they feel they're going to be sued, right? Someone, hit someone or hurt someone in an automobile accident, and no one ever wants to say they're sorry because that's admitting guilt, right? So, back in the 20s, Craig, I'm not gonna call you Keith this time. I'm gonna call you Craig. Can I get you to hold on for just a minute so that we can step out for a quick break? Sure, no problem.
Right. We'll be right back on Spaced Out Sundays.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the CHIVE and CHIVE Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, CHIVE Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thaw, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother Is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio, and while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Every night on Spaced Out Radio, we have places for you to hang out. Hi, this is Carl. Join our SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook for live chat. On Twitter, using hashtag Spaced Out Radio, you can also join us in our Spreaker chat room. Check us out on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR. All of our archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. By the way, I'll be watching you at your window until you do. Bye!
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com. Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Geraldine Orozco from San Francisco's Bay Area Meditation. I invite you to join me the first Tuesday of every month with Dave Scott for Spaced Out Radio's The Spiritual You. In this fast-paced world we live in, it's time for you to take some time for you. We'll cover every possible subject from powerful meditation to healing techniques to your own intuition and spirituality. So come join us for The Spiritual You.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Move over, brother, and let me own Saturday night.
This is Rich Giordano, and I'm inviting you to tune on in to Spaced Out Saturdays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, where I'm going to bust open the lids on everything paranormal. Why? Because we want answers, and I'm the guy who's going to deliver those answers to you. Join the chat rooms, and we'll see you this Saturday. Just be there. No, really.
Looking for the stories of the strange and weird that you will find hard to find anywhere else? Check out the SOR Newswire on our website. Our writers, led by Captain Shirk, are scouring the world for the oddest and most bizarre stories we can find. Everything from weird crime to suspenseful and paranormal. We're working hard for you to bring you the most intriguing news of your day. Check out the SOR Newswire at spacedoutradio.com today.
but Deerfield wasn't really affected by it until her funeral. That's where you see the photographs of her service and what all went on that day.
What can you describe a little bit of what it must have been like in the town, having all these news people there and reporters there? Because it would certainly be different than it would be today with satellite trucks and cameras. What was it like a little bit?
Well, interestingly enough, I think you got to look at the photographs at that time to understand it. And so here's kind of an interesting story. When I started working on the book, halfway through the process, the Chicago Tribune ran a story on the case. And I was like, no way. How does this happen that the Tribune just happens to run a story on this while I'm almost complete with getting this done? And I reached out to the reporter who did the story, and at that time he said, well, you know what, it wasn't my idea. It was actually our historical photo archivist that brought the story to my attention. And he said, here's her name. If you want to reach out to her, go ahead and do so. So I contacted her, and we played email tag back and forth. But what ended up happening was she ended up telling me that, her job as the historical photo archivist is to go down in the basement of the Chicago Tribune and dig out historical pictures. And she said it looks kind of like that last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, that giant warehouse with boxes stacked to the ceiling, right, of all this stuff that no one knows where things are at. And she said she's always walked down this one aisle and seen, like on the fifth shelf, this box that said Knaak murder, and she always wondered what was in there. So she said finally she just got a ladder and climbed up and brought it down and opened it up. And when she opened it up and started going through the newspapers and the photos, she's like, my gosh, we have to do a story on this, right? So my natural reaction was, can I please come down and see what's in that box, right? I mean, here's these hidden articles and photos that no one's seen. And after playing, again, a series of email tags with her editor said, no, we can't have this guy come down and look at things. But what was nice was, at the time, she clearly realized I have more information on this case than anyone else that she had spoken with. And I was feeding her little lines and bits about some of the stuff that we've talked about tonight and some of the other players that were involved in it. And what she was sweet enough to do was, when the Tribune ran this article, what they also did was they ran an online photo gallery that had additional photographs on the online version. And at that time, there were 3 photographs that were loaded in connection with the article. Well, she sent me an email, and she goes, well, check the online archives. And so I did, and those 3 photos became 11 photos. What she had done was she had scanned additional photos that were in that box and had posted them in the photo gallery of the online article, in essence giving me the opportunity to look in the box, right? Kind of great. And
nice.
Then I would, and then I would call her or send her an email later and say, do you have anything on this person? So now if you go to the Chicago Tribune website and you look at the photo gallery for this case, there are 23 photos that are now on that photo gallery because of her. Now, I tell you, I share that story with you because you had asked what was the town like at that time. And what struck me with all these pictures were it gave you a whole different insight to this case, seeing these pictures. All the characters, Rosenhagen, Spade, Chris Lewis, the janitor, these guys all became like their 15 minutes of fame of getting their pictures in all the newspapers around the United States. And so there's all these poses of Spade holding these shoes and the purse, next to the furnace. So I'm sharing that with you because I think many of the characters became very caught up in this. It became a way for them to get a little fame out of the case, and so I think there were folks that were probably horrified by this, but then there were also people that were happy to get in front of the camera and cooperate with the media because they were a little starstruck.
Do you think that opportunity to get 15 minutes of fame could have influenced the investigation or influenced people's opinions as they moved along, or was it just they were doing their job but also kind of enjoying the 15 minutes?
I think the second. I don't think it would have influenced their job. What happened was when the Waukegan sheriff and the state's attorney got involved in the case, it would be kind of like the FBI coming in and taking over a case in a local town, right? There was, once they entered into the picture of starting to be involved in the investigation, Lake Bluff law enforcement, our three folks, Hitchcock, Spade, and Rosenhagen, were no longer needed and were not. They were questioned, right? They were suspects in the case. They weren't contributing to the investigation of helping solve the crime. So, does that make sense? It's yeah.
How did they react to that? To having a higher law enforcement authority come in and kind of turn them from investigators to potential suspects?
You know what, Everett? I don't think they ever thought of themselves as investigators, and it's why all the evidence got thrown out in the ashes to begin with. Again, keep in mind, this is the 1920s, peacekeeping, simple law enforcement place where these guys are handling phone calls of local teenagers driving through the streets shooting their guns at raccoons, right? Those were the types of problems that they're handling. So when the Waukegan sheriff and the state's attorney got involved, I think, honestly, they were happy to wash their hands of it because they had no business investigating the case. Even Chief Spade, who becomes the new chief of police, he had no police training. When I looked up his history, he was a naval officer. He served in World War I. He was from the state of Wisconsin, and he had a sixth grade education. He had no formal police training. He had a sixth grade education. So this wasn't a situation where any of them, I think, were upset that the sheriff or the state's attorney were involved in it. In many ways, they were probably relieved.
Okay. You had said earlier that kind of the aftermath and when you begin to look down the timeline is when this begins to get interesting. What happened as the attention and the fame died down, and then we begin to move forward in history?
Right. Well, what you really have to know again is what ends up happening after this case takes place. Because if you're just looking at only the facts of the case alone, it becomes easy to just look at Hitchcock as the suspect. But what you'd have to really know is what was going on in our beloved little town at that time. And what I would share with you was, like 5 years afterwards, there was a magazine called True Detectives Magazine, and they came and did a story on this 5 years afterwards. And what was brought up at that time was new stories and new things, such as there were two suspicious men that were seen driving a car around town who had rented a home in Lake Bluff, and the neighbors had seen they had a shovel and were digging in their backyard, right? So that came up as, who are these two strange people and who are these men around in town? You also have to understand that Hitchcock was later arrested for stealing, and along with his son. And what had happened was, after this case breaks, Rosenhagen is relieved of his duties. The village officials ask Hitchcock for his resignation. And the reason why they asked him for his resignation was there was also suspicion as to how Elfrieda Knaak gained entry into the village hall. Now, there were times at the hospital where she said she had a key to the village hall that was given to her, and there were other times where she said the back door was open, and so she let herself in. But because there was this suspicion that Hitchcock was her teacher, that she said that she had a key, they asked for Hitchcock's resignation. So Hitchcock retires. Spade takes over, who was the deputy motorcycle patrolman, as the new chief of police. Now, Spade always suspects that Hitchcock was hiding things. He always suspects that Hitchcock was involved in this. So he doesn't really give up on this. And 6 months after this case happens, Spade shows up at Hitchcock's house and arrests him and his son for stealing. Now, what's printed in the newspapers were that Hitchcock and his son were stealing from the homes of the Lake Bluff residents. And what we later find out, though, was this was really Hitchcock's son. Hitchcock's son ends up doing prison time for this, but Hitchcock gets off scot-free. And everyone's always wondered, why did Hitchcock get off? It seems like this guy is slippery and always seems to escape things. Why did he get off, and why did his son end up doing time? What I found out was this. His son at the time of the arrest by Spade was a senior in high school, and he was the team tennis captain. And they had kind of a nice little lifestyle, and he was kind of dressed very dapper all the time. Well, as soon as Hitchcock is fired, he has no income coming in. The family's basically, they have no source of income other than Mrs. Hitchcock's accounting work that she does. So he was stealing things to sell so that he could buy clothes, and Hitchcock's son this is, and kind of keep that lifestyle up. So there were things being reported as missing and stolen from homes. They find these in Hitchcock's home, and at the time that they arrest his son, there's also some paint that they find in Hitchcock's basement that they find that is also stolen from the local hardware store. And Hitchcock, under questioning, confesses that he did indeed steal the paint from the hardware store. Again, not a thing you want to be doing when you're the night watchman of the town, going into the hardware store and stealing stuff, but nonetheless, kind of a petty crime. I cannot find why he didn't do time for this, but my guess is I'm thinking the hardware store guy probably didn't press charges. I'm thinking he probably knew Hitchcock. Hitchcock was the night guy. It's a small town, and the family was down on their luck, and he probably just didn't feel like making things worse. But the other families that the son had stolen from obviously did press charges, and that's where he ends up going to prison, and the father, Charles Hitchcock, does not. So you have this whole thing of Hitchcock stealing. Was he a part of this? But the bigger thing is Hitchcock goes on to end up getting divorced from his wife, clearly because they're going through hard times. He moves to a different town, and 5 years afterwards ends up marrying a different woman. The woman that he ends up marrying is Marie Mueller, who was Elfrieda Knaak's best friend. And through that is where we then end up finding out that Charles Hitchcock was not necessarily telling the truth when he was questioned for the coroner's inquest on Elfrieda's death. That Elfrieda's best friend, Marie Mueller, ends up saying that both she and Elfrieda were in love with Charles Hitchcock. They both had taken his course at the YMCA, and they were both vying for his attention. And she also states that she knew what happened to Elfrieda that night, and that Charles Hitchcock was her beloved god, and that she would never talk about what happened. So that's where we then get into this, okay, there was clearly some things going on that did potentially involve more than just Elfrieda herself. The other part, too, is, and we hadn't touched.
Do we have Kraig back? Kraig, are you there? Okay, we are efforting, as Dave so likes to say, to get Kraig back on the line. We're working on it. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Kraig, you got disconnected there for a second.
Yeah, we did. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there.
That happens with Skype sometimes.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I don't know where I left off and where I got cut off.
We were talking about Marie Mueller and Hitchcock eventually marrying, and kind of how it came to light that maybe Hitchcock wasn't being entirely honest in his statements in the investigation.
Correct. So you have all that factors into it. But the other thing that I've also picked up on is there were additional strange things that were going on within this community beyond that too. For instance, there was bootlegging that was also happening within our town. Now, there is a historic dairy farm in the northern part of our town called Crabtree Farm, and it's still historically preserved. They give tours there, but it was one of the largest operating dairies for its time in northern Illinois. And we had always suspected that there was bootlegging. We had heard rumors of this, but I ended up locating a relative connected to the Crabtree Farm family that owned it at the time, and that person confirmed that there was indeed bootlegging and a relationship with Capone's gang to bring booze up from the lake and through the Crabtree Farm property. So you've got a lot of things also going on in this town, because if you think about it, Hitchcock was the night watchman, right? When is booze usually moved during bootlegging time? It's typically not moved during the middle of the day. It was usually moved in the evening. So who was a guy who would potentially be on the take for taking bribes or money or looking the other way? Probably Charles Hitchcock. If he's the type of guy to steal paint out of the local hardware store for an extra $1, he's also probably going to be the guy who would take a bribe or look the other way for a caravan of trucks or cars to come through. So, the other things that comes into play was Elfrieda Knaak possibly in the wrong place at the wrong time? And I look at this as a parallel to even Ron Goldman in the O.J. Simpson case with Nicole Brown Simpson. Ron Goldman was this waiter who was returning something to Nicole Brown Simpson's home. She had dinner that night. Was that just by chance that he was killed that night and murdered too? They were also rumored to have been romantically linked. Was he in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was Elfrieda Knaak possibly at the wrong place at the wrong time? Did she maybe enter into the village hall and find herself in trouble with some folks that were maybe showing up to visit Charles that night? Did she know more about what was going on in town, and was he worried that she might spill or say something about potentially relationships financially that he was getting payouts from. Again, this is all speculation, and it's speculation in the book The Furnace Girl and as a fictional account, but it's based on true fact of what was really happening at that time. And that is, there was a lot more going on in this town than just the headlines of her confessing that she did this to herself.
Was there any investigation into, Hitchcock's financial records to look and see if there was something taken?
No. Nope. None.
Wow. In this day and age, that would be the first thing that would happen. Kraig, we're going to step out for a break, and we're going to continue talking about Marie Mueller a little bit when we get back. We'll be right back on Spaced Out Radio.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I'm bringing you the Woo every Monday through Friday on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going all out to bring you the strangest, oddest stories and subjects I could find for your entertainment. Why? Because when we hit peak Woo, I know I've done my job. So come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com, 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, and together, my friends, we own the night.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
John Resig here, founder of CHIVE Charities. And just like you, we have a penchant for the uncommon, the overlooked, and the off-the-cuff. CHIVE Charities operates a bit differently than most organizations. We listen to our recipients to find out exactly what they need, and then we give it to them. We provide people with rare medical conditions, veterans, and first responders with grant items that will make a direct impact on that person's life. We don't just forget about our recipients when the van or the wheelchair has been delivered, though. Our recipients are part of our CHIVE Charities family for life. By becoming a donor with us, you could be a part of that family too. And our listeners of Spaced Out Radio know that thinking differently can be a very good thing. To get to know some of our recipients and to support Spaced Out Radio's official charity, head over to chivecharities.org and start making a real difference today.
If you're heading to Vancouver, make sure you stop by the official bar of Spaced Out Radio, the Moose Vancouver. It's the place to party in YVR. At the corner of Nelson and Granville, the Moose Vancouver is always up to speed with a kitchen staff that serves great food. All food on the menu, $6.95 to $8.95. There's a reason the Moose Vancouver is recognized as one of the hottest spots on the West Coast. Get your horns up for the Moose Vancouver.
Come hang out with Spaced Out Radio, where we own the night. This is Carl. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and during the show, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio to chat with us live. On Instagram, at Dave Scott SOR. On Facebook, give our page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. SOR archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. Come join us, or I will come join you. See you at your window.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
Are you having encounters with the paranormal, supernatural, or ufological that you cannot explain? Look no further than the SOR Sightlines Report, brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. This is Ryan Stacy, head of the Research Association, TESA. Soon on the Spaced Out Radio website, you'll be able to file your reports and have them researched for you. We are independent and ready to help Spaced Out Radio listeners today.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at MightyMooseBeard.com today.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thaw. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
Hi, this is Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we store all of the SOR show archives for free. And as an added bonus, every 2 weeks I'm posting brand new content on Cryptid Tales, where I will get into some of the spookier legends and folklore from around the world and tell the stories that go with them. Find us at youtube.com/spacedoutradio and check out Cryptid Tales today. Drop a comment and let me know what you want to hear. See you there.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
At spacedoutradio.com, we have a little bit of everything for you to stay up late. So while you're there, check out our SOR Newswire, where our team brings you stories of the weird and strange to the WTF from around the globe. News on Bigfoot, UFOs, paranormal, Darwinian-type crime tales. It's the stories that the mainstream media usually won't touch. Well, we got them all on the SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Come hang out with me, Little Richie G, as I take over the airwaves on Spaced Out Saturdays. This is Rich Giordano, and I'm going to bring you the most fun on the radio you can have with your clothes on. We're going to get to the heart of the subjects from UFOs to what's going on in the paranormal and everything in between. So come join me at spacedoutradio.com, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, for the fastest 3 hours of your week.
My hands can feel good. I'm free. I'm remembering who I am. My hands can feel good. I'm free.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer. Thank you for sticking around with us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates, KDNF, AM 1560 in Dangerfield, Texas, KDUN, AM 1030 in Reedsport, Oregon, KZFX 93.7 FM in Ridgecrest, California, WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, and UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans. On the digital side, we are on Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. Please don't forget you can check out our archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our slick, brand-new website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to the guitar god himself, Bumblefoot, shopping in the SOR store, and reading up on the SOR Newswire, where you can find Dave's weekly blog, and so much more. Before the break, we were talking with Kraig Moreland, not to be confused with Keith, about his book, The Furnace Girl, The Mysterious Case of Elfrieda Knaak. And, Kraig, where we left off, we were talking about a woman named Marie Mueller and her connection to Charles Hitchcock and just kind of the oddities of that situation. Can we expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. So Marie Mueller was, I guess in current days terms, was Elfrieda Knaak's bestie. She was Elfrieda's best friend, and one of the photos that I spoke about that was in the Chicago Tribune archives, there's actually a picture of the two of them in their early 20s together that was in that box, and was a picture that I had not had access to. Marie was a stenographer. She worked as a court report person. Taking, stenography is when you're listening and reporting what you're hearing. And she lived in Waukegan, but was also clearly, for whatever reason, taking classes at the YMCA with Elfrieda, which is where she also was involved and met Charles Hitchcock. So you've got Elfrieda and her best friend both competing in this love triangle for this married gentleman's affection. And as I had mentioned earlier, after this case finishes and Hitchcock's wife divorces him, Hitchcock goes on and ends up marrying Marie Mueller. That becomes his second wife, and they stay married until each of their deaths. So they basically were married for I think about like 25 to 30 years, and Hitchcock passed away in 1960, but Marie Mueller lived until 1994. So she outlived him by a little over 30 some years.
Did anybody ever investigate whether she could have been the woman in that potential theory of the suicide pact?
No one ever did, and she testified at the inquest, ironically, but they never asked her any questions to her potential involvement. The only thing that they questioned her on was if she felt her friend would have the mental strength or ability to go through with something like this, and she states that she thought she did. She said that she was very strong in her spiritual beliefs and very strong in her connection with God, and that she felt that her friend could actually do this. So did she answer that way so that she was covering for herself? We don't know. But that is really, she wasn't questioned long on the stand. Hitchcock was questioned for over a half hour, from my understanding from the testimony. He was the person that received the most questioning and suspicion. I think she was probably asked one or maybe two questions and then dismissed, and she's never spoke of after that point. She's never looked at a suspect, but it sure looks suspicious when you find out afterwards what took place.
Now, did this murder cause the loss of his businesses with Hitchcock there? You had said he kind of had a little side business teaching some courses on sales improvements and things like that. If he was fired from the police department and then to the point where he or his son were stealing clothes or money to buy clothes and maintain their lifestyle, I'm guessing that this seriously impacted his businesses, or did he just shut those down?
Well, I don't know if he went on to continue teaching at the YMCA. That is never discussed. I'm assuming most of what he did was probably working as an entertainer, still doing his one-man shows and basically hired to do impressions. I know that he went on to become a bill collector. That's listed if you look at gosh, why am I mind blanking on this? What comes out every 10 years?
The census?
Thank you. The census. In the U.S. Census reports, he's later listed as a bill collector. So he worked in that industry for a while. He did his one-man show, but I don't think he probably taught anymore up at the YMCA. And also too, just to clarify again, it was his son that was stealing to maintain that lifestyle, not Hitchcock. That's why his son went to prison and Hitchcock didn't. It was his son that was found stealing from the homes, not Hitchcock. But when you read the newspapers all say that Hitchcock was found stealing from the homes. And if you read closer later on, you see it was really just his son.
Okay, now Rosenhagen died shortly after all of this, but what became of Spade, the police officer who became the chief of police after this happened?
Yeah, so he ends up becoming the chief of police of Lake Bluff, and he maintains and stays the chief of police until his retirement. So he retired in 1946. So he basically served as the chief police from 28 to 46, and then he retires, and he passed away in 1982. Now, interestingly enough, there were some Lake Bluff police officers who went to Spade's funeral and talked to his son. Now, here's the other very interesting thing of this whole case. Despite this being national headlines, being in every major paper across the United States, if you can believe, there is nothing that is on record on this case anywhere. There's no reports at the Lake Bluff Police Department. There is no case file at the state's attorney's office in Waukegan. And there is not even the autopsy report for Elfrieda Knaak, even though we know through reading the headlines and all the newspaper articles that there was an autopsy performed before the coroner's inquest. There is no autopsy report on her. Now, I have some friends who are judges in Lake County, where we are, who also worked at the state's attorney's office back in the 1990s as assistant state's attorneys. And when I was working on the book, I asked them if they could get the original investigation file for me. And so two of them are judges now. One is a lawyer, still a lawyer, I should say, and two others that were assistant state's attorneys in the office have gone on to become judges. The judges reached out to the historical archivist at the state's attorney's office and put in a request for the Knaak file of the whole case. Nothing exists. It's all vanished. All the information's gone. Now, that is suspicious unto itself, because I'll guarantee if you go to L.A., all the files and the investigative information on, like, the O.J. Simpson case is still there and still locked away. How is it that all this information disappears? That was very suspicious. But then to add to that the autopsy report was also gone was even more strange, because I went to the coroner's office in Lake County, and I told them I was working on this book project and that I wanted to request if I could get the actual autopsy report, that I knew that there was one performed because it's in the newspapers. And the receptionist asked me if I was connected to the family, if I was a family member. And I said, I'm actually not, but I feel there was maybe some information missed on this, and I would really love to get a copy of this. And she kind of looked at me and she goes, all right, give me your name and number. So I gave her my information, and I get an email 2 weeks later from her. And she said, Kraig, we do not have the autopsy report here in Waukegan. We know that, I know and you showed me the article that there was one that was done, but we don't have one here. But that's not unusual. She said, our office is only so big, and, oftentimes we will send our files down to Illinois, to Springfield, to be scanned and stored in Vital Records. So she said, what I decided to do was put in a request for you to Vital Records in Illinois to get the autopsy report for you. She goes, what's really strange is it's vanished, and there's no record of any autopsy even in Springfield, Illinois. Now, that just stinks of conspiracy, right? How does the main investigative file disappear from the state's attorney's office? How does the autopsy report vanish not only from Waukegan but from the the state capital of vital records in Springfield, Illinois. And there was Spade's own investigative file that he kept as the chief of police. And when these officers went to his funeral, they asked his son, hey, we know your father was very involved in this case. Do you know if he has any records? Now, keep in mind this, that back in the 1920s, the 30s, the 40s, when you were the police chief and you retired, you took all your files with you. Those weren't viewed as community property. They were viewed as your personal files as the guy who was the chief at that time. So we do know that anything that was done as far as an investigation with this case through the Lake Bluff Police Department and through Eugene Spade, that he took those files with him when he retired. So we know that those files went with him. So the sergeant of Lake Bluff asked, do you know where those are? And Spade's son replied that he goes, I know that all my dad's stuff is in an old trunk in our attic, and if I ever locate this, I'll get a hold of you. And he never heard anything about it after that. So all the information on this case has completely vanished.
How does that happen? Because you're talking, three different files from essentially three different agencies? How does that just happen?
Well, it's why, if there was something more to her death than just what meets the eye, and there was someone that was looking to get rid of this information, it's why I know Charles Hitchcock could not have been the trigger man, so to speak. There are many folks in Lake Bluff that all want to believe that Charles Hitchcock was the guy to do Elfrieda Knaak in. But I have always felt that Charles Hitchcock was a struggling, retired movie actor, piecing together a living, working three jobs. He did not have the influence or the muscle flex to make that type of stuff disappear. So it would have to come from a much higher level, right? Somebody who had money, somebody who had influence, and somebody who wanted this to go away. So that's all I can tell you is it's very, very strange that all this information has disappeared, and the only way something like this disappears is if you've got somebody who's got the juice who can make it go away.
Does Barney Rosenhagen play into that at all?
Not at all, no. He's, again, Barney Rosenhagen was a German immigrant off the boat doing 4 jobs as a village employee, so, and looking to retire. So he would have no influence to get rid of anything. And he was dead, 6 weeks after this all took place.
Does anybody have a clue on when these records disappeared? Or did they just vanish and nobody even looked for them for decades?
They just vanished and no one's looked for them for decades.
Wow. That's like you said earlier, that screams of some sort of conspiracy.
It does. And the only thing that I could think of as to why the files are no longer in Waukegan with the state's attorney's office is I don't know if the state's attorney, when he retired, if those files were considered part of his property and he decided to take what he wanted to. The state's attorney at that time was a gentleman by the name of A.V. Smith. He's in all the headlines in the 1920s because he was the state's attorney basically fighting all the bootlegging headlines at that time and all the corruption that was going on in Lake County, Illinois. My sense is this case was an embarrassment probably for him. Could he have taken that? Did it come from a higher level? But that still wouldn't explain the coroner's report and the autopsy report. I can see the Lake Bluff police report going with Spade. I could even potentially see A.V. Smith, the state's attorney, taking the file or getting rid of it somehow because it was an embarrassment on his time as the state's attorney. But that still doesn't explain why the autopsy report would be missing from the state of Illinois.
You had said that this was sort of a common practice, that the police chief's files were his to take when he left. Does that include any mysterious deaths or open cases, or were they obligated to leave anything, or could they literally just take whatever they wanted?
I think it was the second. I think they could take whatever they wanted. But I don't know that, Everett, though, from the standpoint of the state's attorney's position. I know that from the police chief's position. I don't know that from the state's attorney. I would certainly think that the state's attorney's reports and investigations would stay on file. I can't see that as their personal property, that they could take that with them. I could see them getting rid of it if they wanted it to go away, but not necessarily taking it.
As the months and years went by, this case would pop up every now and then when somebody would make a claim about it. There were many people who confessed to this crime, didn't they?
Well, there were many people that confessed to it not years later. Most of those confessions came between the time that she passed away on November 2nd and between the time of the coroner's inquest in the middle of November. There was a 2-week time period where, when this was in the newspapers each day, there were all sorts of kind of crackpots that surfaced. One was a person that wrote a letter to A.V. Smith's office from Chicago stating that he was a reincarnated Egyptian priest and that he had put Miss Knaak under a hypnotic trance and then fled the village hall. Of course, nothing came out of that. There was a gentleman by the name of James Kelly, who was a chauffeur from Lake Forest, a neighboring town, who confessed that he had burned her and then fled to the state of Texas. And they end up finding him, and they send the chief of police from Lake Forest down to extradite him back. And in the process of doing so, this gentleman tries killing himself 3 times on the train ride coming back, handcuffed to the chief of police. They get him back to Waukegan for questioning, and at the time that they're bringing him in for questioning, he tries throwing his body from the 3rd floor balcony, handcuffed to the chief of police, over the guard railing, and you've got like 3 men holding on to the police chief, hauling him back up, that he's not pulled down with this guy. And when he's asked why he did this, he says he doesn't know. Well, as it turns out, he was institutionalized. He had been institutionalized, I should say, at an asylum west of this area in Elgin, and had escaped. So, you had a lot of false confessions coming out at that time, but none of them ever led to anything that was substantial or truthful.
How deeply was the confession from this spiritualist priest looked into? Because I could see that kind of fitting her beliefs. I mean, was that investigated at all, or was it just kind of written off as a crackpot?
It was written off as a crackpot. It was just another letter. But again, if you read the papers, they made a whole article about it. They had artists that drew illustrations to the letter showing how this was done. I mean, and again, this is where people get confused, where they start confusing fact and fiction of this case. That if you look at this article and you see all these pictures of how this Egyptian reincarnated priest put her under a trance, and you're seeing all the photos that are hand drawn of this, you start going, oh, there was some truth to this, but really it was just a letter that was sent in the mail to the state's attorney from Chicago.
Were there just the 2 confessions, or did any more come as the years passed?
Those were the only 2 confessions. There were no other confessions years later involved with this in any part or way.
Okay, we are going to step out here for a break in a minute, Kraig, but when we come back, I want to talk about that, because that's one of the things that when I was researching this case a little bit, I found a lot of articles that seemed to imply that there were multiple confessions, that this was sort of an ongoing thing. And I think it speaks to how the media has taken the facts of this case and kind of skewed them a little bit.
I'll be ready to answer anything you've got.
That's fantastic. We are talking with Kraig Moreland, and we'll be right back after these messages on Spaced Out Radio.
Hey everybody, the SOR Space Travelers is open. For just $5 a month, you can hang out with Dave and our crew privately in our members-only section. With your signing, you'll receive newsletters on what's going on with Spaced Out Radio. You'll have direct contact with the host during the show in our chat, live streaming videos, and a great forum for your posts and more. Become a space traveler now at spacedoutradio.com.
You wanted new SOR gear, and now you can have it. The SOR Vault is fully stocked with t-shirts, hats, hoodies, mugs, and everything in between, with great logos for you to choose from. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com, click on the SOR Vault, and go shopping. Pricing is quite affordable, and you can look good representing your favorite show. So go to our website and pick up your new SOR wear at the SOR Vault today.
Hey, Spaced Out Radio fans! It's John Resig, founder of the CHIVE and CHIVE Charities. We live in a world of mystery and uncertainty, which you guys know better than anyone. Sometimes you just need to be brought back down to earth for a while. One of the best ways to stay grounded is to help out with your fellow earthlings. And there's no more rewarding way to do that than to give through CHIVE Charities. Unlike many organizations, we don't necessarily aim to save the world, cure disease, or change the course of history. Our goal is to make the life of veterans, first responders, and those with rare medical conditions 10% happier. We do this by donating one grant item, ranging from vans to therapy programs to prosthetic limbs, to those who need it most. CHIVE Charities is nothing without our donors, an amazing group of underdogs helping underdogs. To contribute to Spaced Out Radio's official charity, head over to chivecharities.org and become a donor today.
Move over, brother, and let me own Saturday night.
This is Rich Giordano, and I'm inviting you to tune on in to Spaced Out Saturdays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, where I'm going to bust open the lids on everything paranormal. Why? Because we want answers, and I'm the guy who's going to deliver those answers to you. Join the chat rooms, and we'll see you this Saturday. Just be there. No, really.
Are you addicted to the woo? Good. Me too. This is Dave Scott, and you can woo it up with me every Monday through Friday, starting at 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, for 3 hours of great entertainment in the subjects you love. UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, intuition. Yes, we hit it all 5 days a week. Look for us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, my friends, we own the night.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens, or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Every night on Spaced Out Radio, we have places for you to hang out. Hi, this is Carl. Join our SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook for live chat. On Twitter, using hashtag Spaced Out Radio. You can also join us in our Spreaker chat room. Check us out on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR. All of our archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. By the way, I'll be watching you at your window until you do. Bye!
Are you having encounters with the paranormal, supernatural, or ufological that you cannot explain? Look no further than the SOR Sightlines Report, brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. This is Ryan Stacy, head of the Research Association, TESA. Soon on the Spaced Out Radio website, you'll be able to file your reports and have them researched for you. We are independent and ready to help Spaced Out Radio listeners today.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thaw, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
From the heartlands of Canada to beards around the world, we know how to take care of you. Fill your follicles with the Mighty Moose Beard Oil. All our oils and balms are handmade and 100% natural ingredients because we care about your beard. And hey, use the promo code SOR2019 and get your Mighty Moose Beard Oil today. You can check us out on our website, mightymoosebeard.com.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio, and while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sundays. My name's Everett Thiemer, and I'm your host. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Don't forget, if you missed any part of the show, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping in the SOR Vault, joining the Space Travelers Club, and so much more. Tonight we've been talking about a book called The Furnace Girl, The Mysterious Case of Elfrieda Knaak. And the author, Kraig Moreland, has joined us for the whole 3 hours. And we've gone in depth on a lot of different aspects of this case, and there are a lot of fascinating little tidbits to find in his book. But I want to circle back around a little bit and talk, Kraig, about, well, we've talked about how she couldn't have done this alone, but could she have done this alone?
Right. So when you look at, there were several folks, including the physicians at the time, who said there was no way she could have withstood the pain. And when she's at the hospital, she states over and over that she was feeling no pain at that time. So here are the little background things that you need to know and understand as to how she could have possibly gotten through this. The first is that you have to keep in mind is that her family owned a pharmacy, and it was 1920. And you had all sorts of things that you could obtain back in the 1920s through pharmacies that you cannot get today without a prescription. Mainly cocaine, which was common in toothpaste. It was in Coca-Cola in the 1920s, and it was certainly available to Miss Knaak if she needed something to get through the pain to do this. Now, we know that this was also, according to what she said, premeditated, right? She said that this was a pact and that the other person did not show, so she did this alone. So we know she was thinking about this for a while, right? This wasn't just some impulse thing that she decided to do that day. She did change her plans that day from what she was doing, but she was clearly contemplating this. So if you were contemplating doing this, would you potentially take something from a store, from your family store, that you know would maybe help you through the process of that? It's one potential theory, and it's one thing to think about. The other thing is I did extensive research on the furnace itself, the make, the model, and I went and interviewed a gentleman who works on these old furnaces from the early 1900s because I really wanted to understand the makings of this and if this was possible, if a person could actually burn themselves in a furnace like this. And as I was describing to this gentleman who works on these furnaces the story and telling him about it, the one thing that he brought to my attention right away, kind of stopped me in the middle of my sentence, and he goes, "Coal asphyxiation." I said, "What's that? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Coal asphyxiation. It's what carbon monoxide poisoning was, but back in the 1920s." And he went on to explain to me that back before carbon monoxide poisoning, the silent killer, where you have folks that fall into a sleep and then just die in their homes of being poisoned, coal asphyxiation was the same exact thing. There were the fumes that were given off from these coal furnaces where people would fall into a sleep and then eventually die. And as a matter of fact, I actually even found on Ancestry.com an article where I have great-great-grandparents from down in Fulton County where they both perished from coal asphyxiation, ironically. So the symptoms of coal asphyxiation is it creates dizziness, you're disoriented, you fall asleep, and then you die. So we know from what Elfrieda had told family members and physicians in the hospital that she said the very first thing she did was that she burned her head, that she stuck her head in the furnace, and then she burned her feet and her hands. So when I mentioned this to my coal furnace expert, he goes, she may have had coal asphyxiation. If her head was stuck in a furnace opening and she had it in there and she was contemplating laying her head back on the coals and had her head inside this furnace for 6 minutes, 7 minutes, she would have been breathing in coal fumes, which would have made her disoriented, which would have made her dizzy, which would have made her possibly pass out or potentially be able to get through something like this. Now, the other thing, too, that we hadn't also touched on is when they did her autopsy, they also found out that she had a fractured arm. So and they speculated that she had fallen during the process of that night, and that's how her arm became broken. Now, initial reports said that they thought she was beaten, and that's why her arm was broken. But if she was dizzy, if she was disoriented, if she had burnt herself this bad, she probably fell or passed out at some point, and that's probably how she fractured her arm as well. So you take into account all of those things, and then the other part to this is when she said that she was feeling no pain, that she confessed this to her family members. I talked to physicians who are burn experts, and what they shared with me was this. When you are taking cookies out of the oven or something out of the oven and you touch something and you burn yourself, that is a first-degree burn. You get a blister on it. It hurts like heck. You have that blister for 3 or 4 days. You can't touch anything with it. But on a third-degree burn is where you char yourself so bad that you literally burn all the nerve endings out, so you don't feel any pain. So if Elfrieda Knaak had and if she did this on her own, if she had something to get her through the initial stages of this, if she had coal asphyxiation, if she potentially had cocaine or some other substance that she had gotten from her pharmacy and had enough to get her through the initial pain, after that, you could literally keep your hand in coals for 10 minutes if you wanted to, because your nerve endings were burned off at that point. You would feel no pain. So there is that physician side of things now with what we know with modern technology that they didn't know back in 1928 that could lead to the possibility that she may have acted on her own, and that would be a possible theory by which she could have potentially done this.
Going down the idea of maybe she had taken some drugs from the pharmacy, back then they didn't keep track of controlled substances like they do today, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So did her father maybe ever say anything about possibly noticing something missing or something like that? Was anything ever reported missing from the pharmacy?
No, and her father, again, was dead at the time of her death. Her father had died 4 years before her death, but her brother Theodore was running the family pharmacy at that time. And there's nothing in any of the reports of anything missing. And to be honest with you, Everett, I don't think things were not checked and inventoried like that the way they are now. You know, I would almost look at it like if you were running a candy store and you've got jars of candy and you see the candy dish is a little low in the root beer hard candy, hey, we need to order some more. That's pretty much how it is. It isn't now like we've got 68 pills in inventory for this and, 22 were purchased today. It was more like the candy store deal. So no, I don't think they would recognize if anything was missing.
And a drug test wouldn't have been standard in an autopsy back in that day either, would it have been?
They didn't test her for drugs. There's nothing in the autopsy findings where they talk about anything about testing her for drugs. Here is an interesting thing that I found out that I didn't know about. They actually sent her brain away to be examined. And what they did know back in that time is they could see signs of abnormalities of people that had mental illness. And so they sent her brain away to be examined to see if she potentially had mental illness. Now, I was blown away by the fact that they had that back in 1928.
That's surprising.
But yeah. So here's what the findings were on that. The findings said that they saw that she had no mental illness, but that it looked like she had some blunt trauma at some point in her life to her brain. They could see that. So that then fed into the more of the theory of was she beaten? Was this violence? But the physicians in the autopsy said there were absolutely no signs of violence with her. She didn't have a fractured skull. She had a burned skull, but she didn't have a fractured skull. And there was also a report that they felt like she had been burned or struck with a hot poker on the back of her neck. And here's what I would suffice with that. You would have to see photos of the furnace, but it had a 1-inch ledging or lip around the whole opening of the furnace. And if you were to open the door, put your head in, and lay on that edge, you would have a burn across the back of your neck, right? Just from the heat of the furnace and that metal edge that you are resting your neck on while your head is stuck in the furnace. So I don't know why they never put that together. Like, oh yeah, that burn exactly matches the exact edging of where her neck would have been if a person's head was in here. That would have been a very quick, easy thing to figure out.
That does seem like a strange thing to not put together. You had talked about coal asphyxiation, and that's very much like today's carbon monoxide poisoning, like you said. But let's go down the road that she stuck her head into the furnace and started burning her head. Would she be in the right frame of mind? Would she be able to be thoughtful enough to continue the process if she's suffering from coal asphyxiation?
I don't have the answer to that. It's simply a theory. My sense is if you're disoriented, if you're dizzy, maybe that's like being drunk, where there are different levels of that, right? And there are some folks that know exactly what's going on when they're drunk, but can control themselves, and other folks that lose complete control and pass out, right? So I guess I don't know enough on that to comment, other than saying that my sense is, if you're asking me, maybe she was potentially had enough that she knew what she was doing, but it was enough to help kill the pain to get through what she had to do.
So, and it could have been maybe, and this is a little bit maybe far out there, but it could have been a combination of these two theories, couldn't it?
It absolutely could be, and it's honestly, in not giving away the Furnace Girl book too much, but that's highly involved with what the theory is. It was probably a combination of a few things going on, with a little historical and historical fiction license for making a good story. If I can plug the book for just 1 minute, the one thing that I would want all the listeners, the one thing that I would want all the listeners to understand that want to purchase the book is this: it is not a book that is 100% on the whole Knaak case. It's a historical fiction book, and the premise of the story is about a boy who's at the orphanage that was in our town at the time. And this boy runs away and is the accidental witness to the crime, is the accidental witness to what took place, the only person that ever saw what took place that night. And so the story and the facts of the case are really told through the eyes of this orphan boy, and it takes all the real facts of the case and makes them a historical story. So I've had several women in book clubs that have read this book who have been surprised by it, because they read the title of the book and they go, The Furnace Girl, oh, this is going to be too dark and too horrible. And what they end up finding out is it's really a heartwarming story about a boy and his little sister being brought to the orphanage. But then eventually you learn the whole Elfrieda Knaak story through that. So if anything, what I feel very proud about the story about is that it's historically correct, in the sense that all the facts of the case that have been so mishmash through the years are actually laid out in a correct timeline based on true facts and what actually took place in the case, but just told as a fictional what-if story.
Well, it's a fabulous book, and I recommend everybody going out and getting it. And I don't say that just because it's somewhat local to me, but because this is a very interesting and incredible story that is going to just pull you in. Kraig, if there is one thing that we could talk about regarding Elfrieda Knaak, I keep going back and forth with the Knaak and Knaak. What's the one thing we didn't talk about tonight that you'd like to have the listeners take away from the story?
Well, I guess the takeaway is I'm not claiming to say I know what happened to her, and this is going to be a mystery that, quite frankly, is probably never going to be solved. The book, The Furnace Girl, could honestly have ended 5 different ways. The story is written to entertain people and to give them a great historical fiction read. But really, all I wanted to do in this story, too, is give Elfrieda Knaak a voice in this story, because if you just read the headlines, people know very little about her and know very little about her family. And all that is really brought up in this story. So if there's anything that I feel proud about with the book, it's that I feel it's a complete, accurate story about Elfrieda Knaak and her family, and that we're still all probably, even after you read it, you're still probably going to have doubts and maybe some questions about things, and that's okay, because I'm not claiming to know what happened to her, but I am claiming to say I probably know the most about the case and know the most about the facts than any other person.
Do you think there's any family member of hers out there, or somebody who was related to some of the characters in this story that has the answers, that has the materials that could maybe solve this case one day?
No, because I reached out and found one of her relatives, and it was a great niece of hers. And when I reached out to her, she didn't even know this story existed in her family's history. I sent her a message through Ancestry.com, and when she called me and I told her about the story, she's like, we had heard the story about some relative getting burned by like hot water from a stove, but never this. So this was the first time that she had ever even heard or learned about this story. So the only thing that she provided to me was a lot more family history about the Knaak family that I didn't know about, photographs from their family, and things that were not covered in the newspaper that help you understand more about who Elfrieda Knaak was as a person, which was a 30-year-old girl who was very religious and devout in her faith, who was a aggressive door-to-door sales girl, but maybe might have had a little bit of a secret life going on that her family didn't know about. And that's not uncommon even in this day and age. So I feel if anything, the book has probably given her a voice that she hasn't been able to have.
Excellent. Kraig, can you tell us where we can find the book, what you're going to be working on next, where we can learn more about you?
Sure. So the book, I'm the co-author of the book. I had my good friend Toby Jones is the writer of the book, and I would explain it in the same way as if you're a director or producer and you have an idea for a film, which is really what the idea of having this book is about. Is I really see it as a film series, a Netflix, a AMC, or a HBO, or a Showtime 8 or 9 part series. That's been my ultimate goal, and I have a little bit of film background, having done a documentary, and I would really like this story to become that at some point. But I needed someone to help me write it, and so writing and producing a documentary is different than writing a book. And so I needed to call on the help of my good friend Toby Jones, who's the other co-author of the book. So you can find The Furnace Girl, The Mysterious Case of Elfrieda Knaak on Amazon. It's also sold in most of the major bookstores that are in the Chicagoland area. But if you're, based on your listening audience, it would mainly be on Amazon is where you'd find it.
Excellent. Kraig, I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I really encourage everybody to go out there and check out your book. If you'll hold on for just a second, we're going to wrap this thing up.
Thanks again for having me.
We've got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. A special thank you to everyone listening in at home, in your cars and at work, our chat rooms, and wherever else you may be. Remember, this show is copywritten by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures. Thanks for sharing your evening with us, because together, my friends, we own the night.